something to think about.
Shalom and greetings. We welcome you to this week's Sabbath message. This week's Sabbath message is entitled The Importance of Tracking Time Periods. The importance of tracking time periods and Yahweh Elohiym's scriptural calendar. So, let us start off by establishing verifiable facts. We're going to start off by establishing verifiable facts. Scripture actually identifies 3 different earth ages. This is provable in several places in the scripture, which we will share momentarily. We are now living in the second earth age. We are now living in the second earth age that began after the war, the rebellion in heaven. This is also confirmable in scripture. Now, before the second earth age, during the first earth age, scripture did not track time periods. I'm going to say this again. Before this second earth age we're living in, during the first earth age, scripture did not track time periods. Yahweh Elohiym established and instituted the tracking of time periods for just the second earth age. So the tracking of time periods correctly is of great importance. Let us allow scripture to validate and corroborate the separation of the first earth age from the second earth age. Allow us to grow to understand that the first earth age is mentioned throughout scripture in both the Old and New Testament/covenant. One example of the first earth age being mentioned is in Ezekiel chapter 28, verses 14 through 15. Understand. This time frame being spoken of was before the creation of mankind. That's the first earth age. This time frame being spoken of was before the creation of mankind. That's the first earth age. So let us read Ezekiel chapter 28, verse 14. It reads, "Thou," speaking of Hasatan, "art the anointed cherub that covereth, and I have set thee so. Thou wast, get that, thou wast upon the holy mountain of Elohiym. Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire." Ezekiel chapter 28, verse 15. "Thou," speaking of Hasatan, "thou wast perfect." Thou, speaking of Hasatan, wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created, till iniquity was found in thee. Now, the word "wast" used in these verses is past tense, meaning during a different time period than the time period it is being mentioned in. Let me just say that again. So the word "wast" in these passages, in these verses, is past tense. So it means during a different time period than the time period it is being mentioned in. The "wast" is referencing the time period of the first earth age. It's being mentioned in the second earth age, past tense. This is validated because the scripture states Hasatan was perfect. Thou wast perfect. Scripture corroborates Hasatan has not been perfect during the time period of the creation and forming of mankind up until this day. He has not been perfect during the second earth age. Another example is in Job, chapter 38, verses 4 through 11. Here, Yahweh Elohim asks Job questions as to where was he or mankind during the time period in which Yahweh Elohim is referencing. So Yahweh Elohim questions Job as to where was he or any man, any mankind during the time period in which Yahweh Elohim is referencing. So let us read Job chapter 38 verse 4. It reads, "Where wast thou?" Where were you? Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare if thou hast understanding. Let me know if you understand what I'm talking about, if you were there, because I didn't see you. Where wast thou? Job chapter 38 verse 5. Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest? Who laid the measures of the, if you know this, then let me know. Or who hath stretched the line upon it? Job 38 verse 6. Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Or who laid the cornerstone thereof? Job 38 verse 7. Job 38 verse 7. When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of Elohim shouted for joy. Now, we must move from just knowing to truly understanding. There were people there, because he's still asking, where wast thou when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy? So we must move from just knowing to truly understanding. To be a son of Elohim, you cannot be born of a woman. So he's asking him in Job 38 verse 7, where were you when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of Elohim shouted? So that means they were there. All the sons of Elohim were there and shouted for joy, but where were you? So we must move from just knowing to truly understanding. To be a son of Elohim, you cannot be born of a woman. So notice, this statement is still tied to where wast thou? Job or any mankind that is born of a woman, they have not been created or formed yet. This is still during the first earth age. This is corroborating this time period Yahweh Elohim is speaking of is the first earth age. Job 38 verse 8, let us continue. Or who shut up the sea with doors when it brake forth, as if it had issued out of the womb? Job 38 verse 9, when I made the cloud the garment thereof, and a thick darkness a swaddling band for it. Job 38 verse 10, and break up for it my decreed place, and set bars and doors. Job 38 verse 11, and said, hitherto shalt thou come, but no further, and here shall thy proud ways be stayed. Now, this passage of scripture is also referencing the time period of the first earth age. This passage of scripture here in Job 38, 4 through 11, like in the Ezekiel 28 verse 14, they both are referencing the first earth age. The first earth age is also referenced in the New Testament / covenant in 2 Peter chapter 3 verses 5 through 7. So let us read. 2 Peter chapter 3 verse 5 reads, for this they willingly are ignorant of, that by the word of Elohim the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water. 2 Peter chapter 3 verse 6, whereby, get this, whereby the world that then was. So the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. Don't miss that. So there was a world that was then, and it overflowed with water, and it perished. First earth age. 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 7. But the heavens and the earth, which are now, this is Peter speaking of the heavens and the earth, which are now, the same heaven and earth which we're living in, second earth age, by the same word are kept in store, reserved unto fire against the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. Scripture is a harmonious document and never contradicts itself. We allow Scripture to share that it speaks of an earth age before this second earth age that exists now. We allow Scripture to share this. As we mentioned at the very beginning, we want to show verifiable facts. Scripture verifies there was a first earth age, and we are currently living in the second earth age. Scripture also mentions the last and final third earth age in both the Old and New Testament / covenant. So let us turn to Daniel chapter 7, verses 13 through 14 and read. Daniel chapter 7, verse 13 reads, I saw in the night visions. And behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven and came to the Ancient of Days. And they brought him near before him. Daniel chapter 7, verse 14. And there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. Now get this. So it's telling you this was given unto that was like the Son of Man, speaking of Yeshua. This was given to him. Glory, given to him dominion and glory and a kingdom that all people, nations, and languages should serve. But get this part. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. So now remember, in 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 7, this second earth age, it tells us in 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 7, this second earth age is kept in store, reserved unto the fire against the day of judgment and the perdition of ungodly men. So this second earth age, it's just being reserved now, but it's just reserved for a period of time unto fire against the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. And then it's going to pass away. So validating this second earth age has a set time period. But Daniel chapter 7, verse 14 just shared that this third and final earth age is final. It never goes away. It's everlasting. Validating it does not track time periods. It's eternal. It's everlasting. Notice, Daniel is referencing a vision in Daniel chapter 7, verse 13. Daniel is referencing a vision. This reveals something that is to come. It's a vision. It's not happening right now. He's visioning this. He's envisioning this. And infers that Daniel's present, this second earth age, will pass away to this vision that he's envisioning. The last and final third earth age is also mentioned in the New Testament / covenant, in the Gospels of Matthew, chapter 24, verse 35, the Gospel of Mark, chapter 13, verse 31, and the Gospel of Luke, chapter 21, verse 33. They all say the same thing. So let us read the Matthew account. So the Gospel of Matthew chapter 24 verse 35 reads, heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. Now these passages of the Gospels in Matthew, Mark, and Luke share Yeshua is speaking of the current or second earth age, and that it will pass away, ushering in the last and final third earth age. Now that we've established verifiable scriptural facts concerning the three different earth ages, let us understand that, get this, only the second earth age tracks time periods. Only the second earth age tracks time periods. Scripture does not validate or corroborate that the first or last and final earth age track time into periods that can be broken out. Scripture does not validate or corroborate this. As we continue to establish supportable scriptural facts, we will go to Genesis to show that the second earth age tracks time into periods that can be broken out. From the very start of this second earth age, it tracks time by days, weeks, months, and years. It does this by using Yahweh Elohim's scriptural calendar. So, the second earth age tracks time by days, weeks, months, and years, but it does it by using Yahweh Elohim's scriptural calendar. The second earth age starts tracking time by days in Genesis chapter 1 verse 3 through Genesis chapter 2 verse 3. We won't read all of those. I'm sure are familiar with that. Day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7. But allow us to grow from just knowing to understanding that the number 7 is the number of spiritual perfection. Number 7 represents throughout the scripture spiritual perfection. And likewise, number 8 throughout the scripture represents and is the number of regeneration or new beginnings. So understand this. Nothing can be added to perfection. It's perfect. You can't add anything to it. Which is why the number after 7 being spiritual perfection, so nothing can be added to that, which is why the number 8 must regenerate. It must start anew. It's a new beginning. Throughout Scripture, the number 8 represents a regeneration or a new beginning. So understanding this, Genesis chapter 2 verse 3 establishes and begins tracking time by weeks. 7 days equaling 1 week in Genesis chapter 2 verse 3. So let us read Genesis chapter 2 verse 2 through 3. Genesis chapter 2 verse 2 reads, and on the 7th day, 7 spiritual perfection, Elohiym ended. Spiritual perfection, it has to end. He ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the 7th spiritual perfection day from all his work which he had made. Genesis chapter 2 verse 3. And Elohiym blessed the 7th day and sanctified it because it's perfect. He blessed it and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work. He had stopped on that 7th day. That was it. That was a wrap, which Elohiym created and made. So again, we see here, this validates the day, the tracking, Genesis 1 through 3 through 2 through 3, but Genesis chapter 2, verses 2 through 3, it actually then shares with us the tracking of time by weeks. Because 7 days equals 1 week. And then after 7, we got to start over again, with the number 8 being the one, the regeneration, the new beginning. Now, Scripture first mentions tracking time by months in Genesis chapter 7, verse 11. Now, the King James Version of the Scripture does not present clearly how many days are in a month. So, we have to do some simple, very simple math in order to determine the number of days in a month. Scripture allows us to calculate how many days are in a month. Scripture allows us to do this simple math. So let us read Genesis chapter 7, verse 11, Genesis chapter 7, verse 24, and Genesis chapter 8, verses 3 through 4. We're going to start with Genesis chapter 7, verse 11. It reads, "In the 600th year of Noah's life," get this now, get this, don't miss this, "in the second month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened." Let us skip down now to Genesis chapter 7, verse 24. "And the waters prevailed upon the earth," get this now, get this, "an 150 days." So Genesis chapter 7, verse 11, and Genesis chapter 7, verse 24, these scriptures give us data points of when the flood began and for how many days the waters prevailed upon the earth. Gives us those two. When the flood began and how many days the waters prevailed upon the earth. Okay, so we've got those data points. So let us continue reading now Genesis chapter 8, verses 3 through 4. Allowing Scripture to share what time frame we should be at the conclusion of the 150 days. So let us read Genesis chapter 8, verse 3. It reads, "And the waters returned from off the earth continually. And after the end of the 150 days, the waters were abated." So again, corroborating Genesis chapter 7, verse 24, 150 days that the waters prevailed upon the earth. Here it's telling us at 150 days, the waters were abated. Let's continue, Genesis chapter 8, verse 4. "And the ark rested," now get this, "the ark rested in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, upon the mountains of Ararat." Now, once again, Scripture gives us data points needed to determine how many days are in the time period defined as a month. Scripture gives us data points to be able to determine this. The flood started on the 17th day of the second month. It tells us that in Genesis chapter 7, verse 11. And it ends on the 17th day of the 7th month. We just saw that, Genesis chapter 8, verse 4. Okay, so this is a total of 5 months. 5 months. So we need to count 150 days, starting with the first completed day of the second month, which would be the 18th day. Because if it started on the 17th day, the 18th day would be the first full completed day. So we need to start to count 150 days, starting with the first completed day of the second month, which is the 18th day, because we started on the 17th day of the second month. So we're going to start counting with the 18th day of the second month. Now, we shared in the message/episode, Yahweh Elohiym Scriptural Calendar, that there are 30 days in each month, with an additional day added to each of the months of remembrance or seasonal change months. So every month, if it's not a month of remembrance or a seasonal change month, meaning that's the month that a season changes, that each month is 30 days. We also allow Scripture to establish that the first month is the beginning of spring. So the calendar starts with the beginning of spring. That season of spring is the very first month, and it has 31 days. The first month. If you've not seen the video, Yahweh Elohiym Scriptural Calendar, you're strongly encouraged to watch it. It is on his servant's website and YouTube channel. Both links will be given at the end. Now that we've grown to understand each month is 30 days long, and the months of remembrance or seasonal change months are 31 days long, and that the first month is the spring seasonal change month and has 31 days. Let us validate this by calculating the 150 days over the 5-month time period. Because again, everything needs to be verifiable. Remember, that's what we said we were going to do. Verifiable facts. Note, each season has a 3-month time period. Spring, summer, fall, winter. Each of those has a 3-month time period. And we just shared, we established with verifiable scripture support in the message episode, Yahweh Elohiym Scriptural Calendar, that the first month begins the season of spring. So that's the way it should go. Spring, 31 days. Summer, 31 days. Fall, 31 days. Winter, 31 days. Those 4 months. Those 4 months. So the first month is 31 days. Scripture shares back in Genesis chapter 7, verse 11, that the flood began the second month on the 17th day. Okay? Now we now know the second month is 30 days long because it's not a seasonal change month. So we would begin our count with the 18th day being the first completed day, because remember it said it started on the 17th day. So the 18th day would be the first completed day. So we would begin our count with the 18th day being the first completed day. So if we go 18 to 30, this would give us 13 days in the second month. The third month, we know it's not a seasonal change month or month of remembrance. It's 30 days long. We know that. So this would give us 13 days. Simple math here. Simple math. 13 days plus 30 in the second month plus 30 days in the third month, giving us 43 days. Now, the fourth month, the season changes to summer. Because remember, first month is spring and every 3 months. So 1, 2, 3. So that fourth month, there are only 3-month periods each season. So that fourth month is a season change month. So the fourth month has 31 days, which would give us 43 days that we already have, plus 31 days, giving us 74 days. The fifth month, not a seasonal change month, so 30 days, giving us 74 days plus 30 days, giving us 104 days. The sixth month is not a seasonal change month, so it's only 30 days, giving us 104 days plus 30 days, giving us 134 days. And the seventh month, which is a seasonal change month, but the seventh month we would only count 16 days because it says that the ark rested on the 17th day. It was already rested then, so we can't count that day as a complete day. So in the seventh month, we would only count 16 days, which would give us 134 days plus 16 days gives us a total of 150 days. Because remember, the ark rested upon the mountains of Ararat on the 17th day. So the 17th day cannot be counted as a complete day. So we can see verifiable facts that when we use Yahweh Elohim's calendar, scriptural calendar, we can correctly count the time periods in this second earth age. We have now been able to give verifiable scriptural facts of the second earth age, tracking time by the periods of days, weeks, and months. But it also tracks time by years. Scripture supports this in the very beginning in Genesis chapter 1, verse 14. So let us read. Genesis chapter 1, verse 14 reads, "And Elohim said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night. And let them be for," get this, "for signs and for seasons and for days and for years." So here, scripture supports Elohim establishing that the seasons are highlighted as a method to track time periods. Get that. The seasons are highlighted in Genesis 1:14 as a method to track time periods, thus validating and substantiating the months of remembrance or seasonal change months having an extra day. It also highlights days and years as methods to track time periods. Now that we've grown from just knowing to understanding how Yahweh Elohim calculates time periods in this second earth age, it allows us to see what Yahweh Elohim's scriptural year should look like. Now that we understand how Yahweh Elohim calculates time periods in this second earth age by days, weeks, months, and years, it allows us to see what Yahweh Elohim's scriptural calendar, his scriptural year, should look like. So, we've come to understand, we've grown to understand, there are 7 days in a week, 30 days in a month, with a day added to the months of remembrance or seasonal change months. And there are 4 seasonal change months or months of remembrance. So, this would add up to a total of 30 days that are multiplied by 8 non-season changing months. So there are 8 months that are they're not months that the season changes in. So we're going to multiply 30 days, because that's what a month is, by those 8 months. So that would give us a total of 240 days. Plus, we've got to have those 31-day months that are the seasonal change months, the months of remembrance, the 4 seasons, spring, summer, fall, winter. So those 4 months, we're going to multiply those by 31 days, giving us a total of 124 days. So this would be a grand total of 240 days plus 124 days, giving us a grand total of 364 days in a year. That's all. Just 364 days in a year. That's what we've come to understand. And when divided by 7, the number representing a week, it would be a grand total of 52, exactly 52 weeks in a year. 364 divided by 7 would be a grand total of exactly 52 weeks in a year. Now, interestingly, Yahweh Elohim established the scriptural calendar such that the numeric days of the month, so meaning 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the numeric days of the month fall on the same day of the week in that month. meaning they're going to fall on either Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, every single year. So if the numeric day of 1 falls on Monday, every single year it's going to fall on Monday. We have shared in various messages, episodes, and teachings that Yahweh Elohim does not change. So, Yahweh Elohim's scriptural calendar will not change. It is imperative that anyone wanting to be obedient to the time periods given in the scripture, I'm going to say this again. It is imperative that anyone wanting to be obedient to the time periods given in the scripture know this information. Now, we've gone through this great detail to substantiate the importance of the tracking of time periods correctly. We have verified scripturally that time was not even tracked during the first earth age and will not be tracked during the third earth age. Understanding all of this, the scriptural calendar is how Yahweh Elohim tracks time periods during this second earth age. Understanding all of this, the scriptural, Yahweh Elohim's scriptural calendar is how Yahweh Elohim tracks time periods during this second earth age. So, how does it compare to the secular calendars? We covered this also in the message/episode of Yahweh Elohim's scriptural calendar, how the secular calendars came to be. And unlike Yahweh Elohim's scriptural calendar, they are not consistent. Here is a brief summary of what was revealed in the message/episode of Yahweh Elohim's scriptural calendar. The most widely used calendar in the secular world is the Gregorian calendar, which is a solar calendar tracking months by the sun or solar cycles. In addition, there's a lunar calendar used by some, which is based on tracking months by the moon or lunar cycles only. There is also the Jewish lunisolar calendar, regulated by the position of both the moon and the sun. Now get this, speaking of this Jewish lunisolar calendar, it consists usually, so that's saying not all the time, it consists usually of 12 alternating lunar months of 29 and 30 days each, except for Heshvan and Kislev, which sometimes have either 29 or 30 days. But get this, this Jewish lunisolar calendar totals 353, 354, or 355 days per year. The problem with the secular options of calendars is none of them work without changes being made every year. The Gregorian solar calendar has, as some of its flaws, the total number of days in a year fluctuating between 365 and 366 in a leap year. There being more than an even and exact 52 weeks in a year. You can't get exact 52 when you divide 365, and you won't get 52 if you divide 366 by the 7 days in a week. The lunar calendar has its flaws as well. It only has 354 days in a year and only 50.6 weeks in a year. Likewise, the Jewish lunisolar calendar is flawed, having a minimum of 353 days and a maximum of 355 days in a year. Some can even have 354 days in a year, and only 50.6 weeks in a year. Now, there may be some that may say that Yahweh Elohim's scriptural calendar has a flaw, because the scientific community has validated it takes 365 days for the earth to orbit the sun. The scripture does not contradict the scientific community's finding. But this was not always the case. So let us allow scripture to give verifiable information that initially it only took 364 days for the earth to orbit the sun. Verifiable information that initially it only took 364 days for the earth to orbit the sun. So let us read Joshua chapter 10, verses 12 through 14. Joshua chapter 10, verse 12 reads, "Then spake Joshua to Yahweh." Joshua spoke to Yahweh. "In the day when Yahweh delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel, and he, Joshua, said in the sight of Israel," this is what he said, "Sun, stand thou still upon Gibeon, and thou moon in the valley of Ajalon." So get this, Joshua said in the sight of all Israel, because Joshua spake to Elohiym in that day, and he said in the sight of all Israel, "Sun, stand thou still upon Gibeon," meaning don't move from that spot. "And thou moon in the valley of Ajalon," don't move from that spot. Let us continue with Joshua 10:13. "And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies." It goes on to say, get this, verifiable facts. Joshua says, "Is not this written in the book of Yasser?" The book of Yasser, a part of the Apocrypha and the Sefer, also validates this account. So, the sun stood still. The sun stood still. It did not move in the midst of heaven, and hasted not to go down about a whole day. A whole day. It goes on to say in Joshua chapter 10, verse 14, "And there was no day like that before it or after it." Let me read this again. "And there was no day like that before it, where the sun stood still in the midst of heaven and hasted not to go down about a whole day." There was no day like that before it or after it, that Yahweh hearkened unto the voice of a man, for Yahweh fought for Israel. Scripture is sharing in this passage of scripture that Yahweh Elohim honored the request of Joshua. Yahweh Elohim made the sun to stand still. The sun stood still. It did not move. Meaning, understand what this means. The earth stood still. The earth couldn't continue to move and the sun stand still. That means that the earth stood still. And the scripture shares for how long? This is why we spend so much time detailing the different methods of tracking time in this second earth age. Scripture shared the sun stood still for about a whole day. The sun didn't move. That means the earth did not move for a whole day. And it goes on to reveal there was no day like that before or has been after. Let us understand, the earth stood still, the earth stopped its orbit. The earth stopped its orbit for the period of a whole day. Get this. So, instead of it taking the earth 364 days to complete its orbit, from that day forward, it took 365 days. Scripture is able to verifiably account for how it's for it now taking the earth 365 days to orbit the sun. The scripture is able to verifiably account for it. It's not arguing with the scientific community. Yes, it takes 365 days for the earth now to orbit the sun, but it wasn't always that way. It wasn't always so. Scripture is able to verifiably account for it now taking the earth 365 days to orbit the sun. But get this, what cannot be overlooked or missed is the fact that Scripture does not instruct nor command Yahweh Elohim's scriptural calendar to be amended or changed. So the Scripture is able to verifiably account for it now taking 365 days to orbit the sun, but it does not instruct nor command Yahweh Elohim's scriptural calendar to be amended or changed. We are to account for the additional day added by every seventh year, adding a week to Yahweh Elohim's scriptural calendar. Because every year it was supposed to be 364 days, but because it's now 365, a day is added every year. So every 7 years, which would be 7 days, we add a week to end Yahweh Elohim's scriptural calendar. And by doing this, the first month of the year always begins with the beginning of spring. And that the numeric days of the month, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fall on the same day of the week in that month, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, every single year. It's consistent. This is of great significance because if a calendar is being used that is tracking time in the second earth age differently than Yahweh Elohim's calendar, it will not have the numeric days of the month falling on the same day of the week in that month every single year. So, to be very lucid, to be very clear, if you want to be obedient to keep Yahweh Elohim's time commandments, you must use Yahweh Elohim's scriptural calendar. And if you're using Yahweh Elohim's scriptural calendar, please understand this. You will more than likely not line up with those using secular calendars. Even those that call themselves Jews. I would like to invite you to continue to fellowship and worship the Sabbath with the Ecclesia next Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. In addition, please join the Ecclesia every Wednesday evening at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for prayer. The link for both is provided on his servant's website. Something to think about. If you're seeking a blessing, be a blessing. If this message of something to think about has been a blessing, assist us with your time, talents, and finances in continuing to grow and move from just knowing to truly understanding the word of the Most High, Yahweh Elohim. Peace and blessings.
His servant encourages you and prays that you will continue with him on the journey of growing and moving from just knowing to understanding the word of the Most High, Yahweh Elohim. To support you on your journey, his servant offers the following resources: his servant email address. Please feel free to reach out to his servant at any time with any questions, concerns, suggestions, and/or comments. His servant website and his servant YouTube channel. You are encouraged to subscribe to be alerted of new content. In addition, his servant recommends reading or listening to the beginning of Scriptural Truth, Volume 1. It affords a strong beginning foundation in not just knowing, but understanding the Scripture.